Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Join us every weekday at this time to discuss news, spend time in the Word, and receive answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, Kathy. Here we are continuing our series on the supernatural, and I believe now we're actually getting into toward the end of September. This is Monday, I believe, the 25th.
September 25th, yeah.
Yeah, wow. Big things. This is a day.
When
This
this
is
airs, will you be in Italy or not quite yet?
no. We
Okay.
actually will be home and getting ready to go to Italy.
Okay.
We will. This is a heavy day for us, particularly the 25th. When we think about the 25th, that's the day that Michelle
Mm,
passed
right.
a year ago, and we've been actually praying, and we we're going to actually have an evening of celebration um,
Oh, sweet.
tonight, and the celebration is we've talked about grief,
Mm-hmm.
and it continues. Um, Again, we've said this before that there isn't really a season of grief or just lessons.
Comes in waves, right?
It comes in waves, and both. There's always that sense of loss and remembrance
Mm-hmm.
because you have things that remind you of the great experience you had, and the great
Mm-hmm.
moment, and the life that you had enjoyed together, and the things you did together, and that's no longer available, and it's still in your mind. You still have a hard time with that, just per se,
Mm-hmm.
of because it's like, really, that really is, that's the way it is, and we're really not going to see
Right.
each other, and then of course God reminds us is that, well, wait a minute, eternity is a long time.
Mm.
This is just
This
for a
is but a
moment.
blip.
Her life is continuing, and
Mm.
she's enjoying it, and your life continues and you're enjoying it, and you're going to come back together and be in fellowship in eternity, and
Mm-hmm.
so don't. He said it's good that you're sad. It's good that you have grief, but at the same time, don't let it dominate your thought, because you have a broader perspective of that. And so what we're planning to have an evening of celebration of her life, of grieving the loss, and
Mm-hmm.
but remembering the life that we have and the life we're going to have. That's where we're going to focus on,
Oh,
is
that's
that,
good.
and that's why Paul, when he says in Philippians, to live is Christ, but to die is gain.
Mm-hmm.
Is, there's this, he said, I am betwixt between the two. I'd rather I want to stay here and continue life, but at the same time I'm kind of looking forward to being with him in eternity,
Right. Right.
and so we're gonna respect that, and um, there's always these uh, we have these little supernatural moments that God gives us, that is just I believe it's a remembrance that um,
Mm.
you will be seeing her again. And actually, I want to keep her memory and her life in front of you, because you're just going to step into it. I, in a sense, don't want
Mm.
you to forget it,
Right.
or to diminish it. And so we talked about. I think we talked about when we were at the lake up in uh, Rhode Island. We had gone by this boat that had
The boat, right.
Michelle My Belle, which is a song that I sang to Michelle all the time, and then I actually sent her that I recorded that song and sent it to her when she got sick, and said, "Hey, I love you, and remember our joy of this song together."
Mm-hmm.
Well, just this weekend, Linda and I were going to go somewhere, and Linda was still in the house, and I go out into the car and just start it up, and on comes the song "Michelle My Belle."
Oh, no
Uh,
way.
It was God
Oh,
saying,
that's so
it
sweet.
was just God
So
saying,
sweet.
hey, and actually, you know, paid more attention to the words.
Mhm.
And it really was just, I mean, it was really, it kind of struck me. I've sung it a lot, but it didn't hit me as much as this time. But um, it goes through the song says, and I really just have one thing to say to you, Michelle, my belle. Uh,
Oh.
and it was like, oh man, how fantastic is that? And so it's a rejoicing.
Mm.
It's a interesting thing, which obviously we're learning about grief and life and eternity and all of that is it just one thing I have gained is a greater appreciation for all of life and all time of life that
Mhm.
when we pass, we don't just automatically know everything and we basically don't just do nothing,
Right, right.
and that life, interesting enough, continues. Um, and you just go from one place to the next, but life is going to continue. And the sense of life and the feel of life will be similar to here, which, by the way, ultimately, God says He makes a new heaven and a new earth. So,
Mhm.
so we're back into some kind of a physical place with our resurrected body, so we're not limited like we are in this physical life, but we're going to be in a same dimensional type of thing, and
Mm.
that's why I believe that it continues in eternity. So this day is particularly, when we think about this particular day, we'll have a remembrance and we'll go back,
Mhm.
we'll go back through that experience of it, but we are going to, and we're preparing right now. What does that look like to celebrate and have memory of
Mm.
life when you don't have that life, so
Right.
it's going to be an interesting time. um, well, as we look at the supernatural, we've talked about how do we put ourselves in a position to receive it, the keys to receiving it. Last time we talked about unity and those around you to have a heart to go to faith and believe and experience the supernatural. And we think about the disciples. The one thing that they did well, remember 3 years they're with Jesus, they start out with no understanding of supernatural at all.
Mhm.
And they start to experience it. And we're going to see in the story that we talk about today, this is in their third year, and they still experience frustration with it
Mm.
and lack of it, and they don't know what to do with it. And Jesus's comment back to them is interesting. And um, but the one thing they did is they said, "We are going to stay with this together,
Mhm.
and we're going to learn about unity. We're going to walk in unity." Now we have difficulties with this,
Mhm.
but we're going to remember unity is really just walking with God until we see what He sees. and
Right.
and we get to see that together, which is what the disciples did, is they saw it together, and unity wasn't between them, it was them and the agreement with God to experience the supernatural. And God said it's okay that it takes a while.
Mhm.
um, Took them 3 years to do this, and He said, so don't get frustrated by it. He said the only requirement is don't go to division. Division
Mhm.
is you're not with them anymore. I'm
Right.
not willing to go any further, and keep going with me. So this story, we've gone through the story from a couple different angles, but let's look at it now for how do we put ourselves in this position. This is in Matthew 17 verses 14 to 21.
Okay. Matthew 17:14 to 21.
Yeah.
And when they had come to the multitude, a man came to him, kneeling down to him and saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he's an epileptic and suffers severely. For he often falls into the fire and often into the water. So I brought him to your disciples, but they could not cure him. Then Jesus answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him here to me. And Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and the child was cured from that very hour. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, "Why could we not cast it out?" So Jesus said to them, "Because of your unbelief. For assuredly I say to you, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you'll say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. However, this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting."
Yeah. So they were out healing. They were experiencing supernatural stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and God had given them the authority to do that. By the way, and he describes it here as through belief.
Mm-hmm.
You believed it, so you could exercise it, and they were, and they're having a great time doing it. And then the man comes to Jesus and says, would you have mercy on me? In other words, would you give me favor for my son who is troubled?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he says, well, what do you mean? He said, well, your disciples were out there healing, and so I brought him to them.
Mm-hmm.
And he says they could not cure him. Okay, now um, think about what happened here. Hey, they've been experiencing healing,
Mm-hmm.
fantastic stuff. Dad brings his son. The disciples, yeah, sure, bring him here.
Right.
Lay hands on him, pray over him, be healed. What happened?
Nothing.
Nothing. um, okay, so they tried. They thought because they were healing, this would be, a continuation of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it didn't happen. They tried again, didn't happen. And they basically said, because the dad says, they said, we can't do it.
Mm.
Um, and so, hey, Jesus, they couldn't do it. You
Can
know,
you?
can you? How about you?
Mm-hmm.
And so Jesus's response is, faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I bear with you? How long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Okay, now first of all, who's he talking to? The disciples.
Right.
Um, and he's saying, all
Come
the
on, guys.
and we'll come back to what he's really saying here, but you're faithless and he called them perverse.
Mm-hmm.
How long should I put up with you? Um, okay, now we got to understand his challenge here, which we'll come back to,
Okay.
because it's a pretty strong statement that he's making about it. And, he's trying to share with us that, um, and we'll get to what this really means, is it's okay that you struggle, but the key is you stop walking with me because you don't see the
Mm.
result that you expect. And he said, so he's going to come back to that. And he said, okay, so bring him here. And he cast him out, and the child was cured. Okay, so that all happens. It's all public, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And the conversation's public. How come your disciples couldn't do it? Oh, you disciples, how faithless and perverse you are. And bring him here to me, and he cures him. Um, okay, so now it's over with.
Mm-hmm.
And the disciples privately.
Right. Right.
Now, interesting enough, um, which is the essence of the problem, is they're in the middle of this and they're in a public scenario. They didn't ask Jesus in the public.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now how come?
Well,
Why
they
do
were a little embarrassed
they're
too, I'm
they're
sure.
embarrassed?
Yeah.
And he just said, you're faithless and perverse. So he must not be
Right.
he must not be happy. So we don't want to be rebuked any further publicly. So hey, let's go privately. Hey, Jesus, why couldn't we do this?
What's going on here? Yeah.
And Jesus says, well, because of your unbelief.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the word there isn't. And remember, we see this in Mark, because the story is repeated in Mark. we know the dad, because he says, and by the way, he makes a statement, is he says, all things are possible for you that
Mm-hmm.
believe. Nothing is impossible for you that believe. And so the father says, I believe, help my unbelief. The word
Right.
the word there is, I have a heart to believe. I just don't fully have faith necessary to finish it. Could you help me with that finishing? The
Okay.
word here, because of your unbelief, is you quit.
Oh, interesting.
And you're not willing to go any further. And he said, when he says faithless and perverse generation, he says, by now, um, because you understand who I am, my heart, and who you guys are, and you were experiencing the supernatural, what I would have liked you to have done
Mm-hmm.
when you came up against your limit
Mm-hmm.
is like, well, this is hard to believe this one, and we're struggling with it. He said, that's okay. He said that the problem I've got is you quit
Mm-hmm.
and you didn't come to me and say, we're struggling with this. Could you help us understand it?
Right.
What are we missing that this one we can't fulfill, even though we've been fulfilling others? He said, that's what I was looking for from you.
Mm-hmm.
You guys just quit. Well,
Hmm.
can't do it. That's it. And you didn't even consider to come to me.
Hmm.
The dad did,
Right.
but you
Right.
but you guys didn't. Um, and I would have liked to have you guys say, could you help us understand it? And he says, so I'm telling you something. If you have the faith as a what?
As a mustard seed.
You'll say to the mountain, the biggest thing that's in your way that you
Mm-hmm.
have a hard time believing, that by the way is impossible to move, it'll move.
Right.
Okay, now a mustard seed is, he said, it's this tiny little seed that you plant in the ground and it grows into this big tree
Mm-hmm.
because it grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. And he is implying here that it's to take the little bit of faith that you do have
Mm-hmm.
and bring it to me to water it, to bring it to
Mm.
fulfillment.
And to grow it.
And
Yeah.
that's all you need. You just need to start it and
Mm.
let me take it to the place where you can speak to this impossible thing, because nothing's impossible for God. In other words, don't limit
No.
me in any way. And when you
Mm-hmm.
run up against your limit, which you're going to do, don't quit.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he said faithless and perverse. He said, you quit on me. You didn't pursue any further.
Right.
And you don't have to have it full. You just have to have the mustard seed started. Let's go. And I'll finish it. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says this. He says, this kind does not go out but except by prayer and fasting.
Right.
Okay, now this is a hard kind of a phrase. So our first thought is, well, Jesus, then are there different levels of difficulty that
Mm-hmm.
require prayer and fasting to actually get there, and that's what's required? And he said, well, okay, now think about what just happened. You couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
The dad brings them to me. What did I just do? What did Jesus do?
He healed him.
Did he pray and fast? No.
No.
So it's not about the difficulty of the issue. He said, when he says this kind, he's saying when you reach your limit
Mm-hmm.
of belief and your mustard seed hasn't yet grown fully into faith, and you can't say to the mountain, be moved, because you don't believe it yet.
Mm-hmm.
He said, when you're in that spot, you got to go to prayer and fasting. What does that mean? Fasting and prayer is that instead of continuing your normal stuff,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have to now take special time away
Dedicated time.
and
Yeah.
dedicated time and process with me. And what, boys, I would have liked you to ask me to go
Mm.
into prayer and fasting with me would be, what happened with us?
Mm-hmm.
Where did we wind up with our limit? He said, I'll tell you, I'll talk to you, we'll dialogue about it, I'll take you deeper, you'll understand something, and then you'll stay with me for me to finish faith.
Mm-hmm.
And then nothing will be impossible to you. And he said, so he's implying, guess what? Are we, as we're looking at the supernatural, are we going to run into limits? Sure.
Mm-hmm.
When? All the time. Okay, now think about how easy and simple this is in a way. He says, without faith, it's impossible to what?
To please God.
Okay, so your life, the rest of your life, is going to be
It's going to be,
experiencing
yeah,
moments where you have to believe.
right. Characterized by opportunities to exercise faith, right?
And it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And your experience of it is going to be new. It's going to be, man,
Mm-hmm.
this difficulty, this adversity, this thing is way, way, way bigger than I've ever experienced before. Um, and I believe it up to this point, but I don't have it finished yet because it seems bigger than anything I've ever done before. I've been part of
Mm-hmm.
before. He said, that's okay. He said, well, this kind comes out by prayer and fasting. That's when I need you to go deeper with me
Mm-hmm.
into processing. Faith comes in here and hearing from the word. Stay with me, stay with me, stay with me. And in essence, don't neglect special time with me on this. I'll
Mm-hmm.
show you what
Yeah.
this means, and spend more spiritual time with me, and don't do your normal even eating or watching TV or doing something else. Is take a special time and go
Mm-hmm.
deeper with me, and I'll carry you to that next level. And then, by the way, you're going to have this the rest of your life because it's required to believe these amazing things that I'm going to do, supernatural, in your situation where nothing is impossible. And guess what? Your
Mm.
situations are going to be more and more uh, profound, and they're going to be more and more perhaps difficult in a natural way. And I'm just walking you further and further and further and deeper and deeper and deeper into experience it. And I'm not leaping you to the biggest. I'm going to walk you
Mm-hmm.
into it when day by day, week by week, month by month, so that 3 years
Right.
from now we could be having the same conversation. And guess what? God says you're going to have to believe.
Mm-hmm.
Because overcoming the world is by faith, which is what God speaking, performing resolution
Mm-hmm.
supernaturally. And He said,
That's
what
beautiful.
what you have to understand is it's a work of faith. So I need to draw you into that process, which is have expectation, ask me what I have to say, get clarity about what I have to say, unity.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe what I have to say?
Mm.
And when you don't, go deeper.
Right.
Um,
Stay with me till
stay
you do,
until
till I
you
grow
do.
that belief. Yeah.
And by the way, he said that's cycle is never ending.
Mm.
You can't say I got there. Without faith, it's impossible to please me. Guess what? The rest of your life's going to be faced with these
Right.
situations. And
Right.
I'm trying to show you and trying to show you and trying to show you, And he said, so the key is don't quit on me. It's okay. But when you do, when you have trouble, which is fine, stay with me.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you the faith to believe it. At just all I require of you is the beginning piece of mustard seed. I'll take it the rest of the way. Let's go. And these mountains will move. And by the way, it may take some time, which is fine. Uh, but
Which we don't always love, but
right,
he's working in the process to
right.
grow us in the midst of that,
That's
even.
right. But enjoy the walk, And so it's basically, if we're going to put ourselves in a position of supernatural, is don't quit
Mm.
when we don't experience it. It's to stay with it and keep asking God to show you how He's going to give you the
Mm-hmm.
faith to believe this impossible thing. So, if Heavenly Father, we know that we're all facing tough stuff. We all are facing impossible things, things that are opposing us, things that just aren't working, things that are a struggle, and they're all the time. And so we just pray that we'll bring them to you, that we won't quit on you and go to unbelief, or we refuse to be persuaded that what you have to say is true, but rather we just stay with you, including going to a special time of prayer and fasting and receiving the faith of a mustard seed going to full measure that can then see impossible things done. So we just ask that you would expand our faith and expand our heart and not quit, but rather pursue. And we thank you in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you so much, Rich, for sharing such wisdom and insight. And thank you for joining us, everyone. I also just want to ask, if you don't mind, Rich, just a special request to our listeners who I know love you and Linda with all of their hearts, that as you're listening to this today on the anniversary of Michelle's death, be praying for the Case family
Yeah,
and
thank you.
that celebration of life that they're going to be having. And just as God ministers to their hearts and in both the grief and the joy
Yeah.
of all that He's spoken.
Mhm.
So just lift them up in prayer.
Yeah.
Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next
Thank you.
time.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks.
Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Join us every weekday at this time to discuss news, spend time in the Word, and receive answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. And now your host, Richard Case.